Okay, so hello everyone. Again, Sarah Murphy, and this is our third in our and final webinar in Meaningful Day Services, putting people on a pathway to success. And now it's not. So just as a refresher and just to kind of to look at our and what we've talked about before and how Meaningful Day is really a great way to kind of look at supporting people and providing services for individuals with developmental disabilities. One of the things that we really have to look at is kind of reframing our disability service system so that we're not putting people into programs per se, but that we're providing services and supports that that individual needs. So really looking at person-centered services and starting with the individual. And I'm hoping that you're starting to see these ideas through and through. So with meaningful, again, what is the definition of that? It can be very, very nebulous for people. So, you know, what meaningful means is that it's significant to the individual or society, that it's purposeful and outcome oriented, and that it's valued, that it brings value to either the individual or the community. So that's what meaningful means. And I think what we have to do as service providers is really look at, is everything we're doing for that person meaningful for them? So is it significant or valued by them or society? And is there a purpose or an outcome that is expected from this service? So setting goals and building skills is really what this is about. It's not about taking people out to be in the community. That is not purposeful. That is not meaningful. It's just being in the community. What we really have to look at is how can we really start with what the person needs to learn to be successful and what's important to them. So what I gave you before was, and your assignment was to take that positive personal profile, that easy one-page, anybody can fill it out, and that life skills assessment, a 1 to 5 kind of ranking on what it kind of takes for people to be successful as adults, and to take those 2 documents and starting with that, starting with the person, starting with an assessment of who that person is, what's important to them, and what do they need to know, what do they want to do, and then moving forward to arrange services and supports around that. So with Debbie, one of the things I asked you to do was to really think about Debbie and her interests and her unique characteristics, and what kinds of things jump out at her of her profile and on her skills assessment. What I think I'm going to do now is kind of unmute people and let people weigh in and talk about this assignment and what they found, if I can figure out how to do it. Ooh. I am not seeing. Hey, Renee, how do I unmute everybody?
Under participants.
Oh, unmute.
Can you?
There. Okay. So if you're not speaking, please self-mute, self-isolate, so we don't hear a bunch of clatter. So, what did people think? What did you think about the profiling tool and the? I'm trying to go back to them. There. And this method of starting with the person. Any comments?
Well, it looks like that she has a need to learn to move around in her community, taking the bus, using public transportation. So that could be one thing. And since she likes arts and crafts, she could take the bus to wherever she goes for that. I don't know if it's at her church or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what did you come up with in your community? Did you noodle around on the internet, or did you noodle around, or from what you know, are there places in your community where she could do arts and crafts types of things? And that, getting there on public transportation would be one of her goals.
There is an art studio that she could take. It's on the bus route.
Excellent. What kinds of art stuff do they do there?
They do a lot of painting. Then again, our local library has different crafts on Monday night. So
Okay.
we could look at those, see if that's something that she might be interested in going to.
Very good, very good. And did people see Monday nights? Not Monday 9 to 3, but Monday nights is when you would be trying to support her to do that, and really getting creative on coming up with how could you support her to do that on a Monday night. Very good, thank you. Any other comments? What else did people find out about Debbie that kind of jumped out for you?
Hi, Sarah. This is Terry. I saw that she really didn't have a lot in her, or that she did for her personal care. I would ask her more about learning to cook or being able to prepare at least one food item that she liked. And I looked at, there are some community cooking classes that they have in a marketplace that shares it. And also the local Y has one, and then and they're at different times. In the marketplace, they have some classes on Saturday. I know that the agency I work for, we happen to have cooking classes on different days, and also the Y has cooking classes, and it's mainly seniors, but it's for anybody, and it's like late afternoon, like 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock.
Perfect. And one of the things I wanted to pull out of what Terry was saying was she has a lot of ones in personal care. So she's very reliant on others to do many things for her because of her physical needs. But what we find is it was just always easier. That's what the parents always say. It was just always easier if I did it for her, instead of teaching her to do it for herself. So you mentioned the YMCA as having cooking classes, but the other thing you could teach her to do is to wash her own hair, or to bathe herself. That would be another thing that you could accomplish and teach her in that same environment. So be really looking at how people are reliant on others, and how can you make them more self-reliant, more independent, because that brings with it a sense of dignity and a sense of control over one's life. And that, of course, is often very, very meaningful for people, especially people, in Debbie's situation where they've been reliant on people all their lives, and to be able to do something independently sometimes is just eye-opening for them. And oftentimes, like I said, it was easier for the parents, or people felt like, it went faster when I did it. So people wouldn't give people an opportunity to learn. And sometimes when we start giving them an opportunity to learn later in life, we realize how short we sold them. So, bear that in mind. Any other comments? What, you know, on the profile, you know, what kinds of things does she value? What kinds of things are important to her? Can anyone pull some things up? Get out of this and bring her profile up, but God knows if I'd get back in. Okay, so any other comments, any other suggestions, any other kind of interesting things that popped out for anybody else on the call? Very good. Well, I can see that, you know, that you're really, you know, looking at who Debbie is. You're really trying to find out, you know, what's unique and what her skill sets are. You know, where might you find her tribe? Who should she know? Who needs to be part of her life? And really start thinking about, you know, when you're serving people, you know, how can you find local places where you can teach Debbie skills she needs to learn or address an interest. And that's how we start kind of plotting services and plotting our supports. It doesn't start with a preset curriculum or modules that we're going to, you know, Debbie's going to go through. It really starts with who Debbie is and what Debbie wants. And we build it around that. So really looking at these as supports in the community to do what Debbie wants. Oftentimes too, especially with people with more significant disabilities, they may not have a good bead on who they are or what they're all about. They have very limited life experience to draw from. So even filling out that positive personal profile might be difficult. And if you're seeing all ones on a life skills assessment, it may not be because the person can't do it. It might be because they haven't had an opportunity to do it. So be really thinking about how to utilize those tools to really figure out who that person is and what they're all about. And then you start with that. You start with their interests, their passions, and their personality, and really start looking at, you know, in their neighborhood, in, you know, and by their house. For many years, individuals have been picked up in a van. You think about how special ed works, and the yellow bus shows up from, you know, and they get on the yellow bus and they go to school, and then the yellow bus brings them home. And then what we've done is we've kind of replicated that in our adult service system by taking vans and picking people up at their house and then bringing them and congregating them at a center. And then from the center, we've been going out into the community and doing things. But it's not their neighborhood, and they're not getting to know their neighbors. They're not getting connected to the people that they can access. We're taking them to a place that's not necessarily their own. And it doesn't often result in independence. It doesn't often result in kind of that ability to be self-reliant. And it doesn't build connections to the people that are most important and critical for the individual that we're supporting. So really look at using the person's home base and clustering your services around where people live and not around a facility or a center. So looking at, you know, my neighborhood, my neighbors, and really helping people to connect with the people that are most important to them. The other thing that we would need to look at is to look at all aspects or all domains of life. So looking at how you are and what you can do in your home. Also, you know, how you are and how you, you know, are you independent and able to be safe in the community? And are you able to navigate and travel without support? Can we get to that? And also just looking at, you know, about like looking at people's interests and their abilities to get with, to connect with their friends. I think we are all now as service providers seeing how detrimental it is if the people in our programs cannot get in touch with their friends and don't know how to call each other and don't have each other's numbers. And the only time they see each other is when they come to the facility. It has come home big time this last couple weeks that people are lonely and isolated. if they can't get to the program, we've done them no service. So what we have to really look at is how can we teach people to really connect with the people that are important to them without paid services, because that's what's key. So really helping them to build their tribe, set up a network of friends, and be able to access those friends without us is so important. So you're really building a social and professional network for this person, and who needs to be in it is one of the questions we ask ourselves. We look at the whole person, and we really look at, what are their personal goals 3 to 5 years from now? Where do they want to see themselves? Where do they want to be? And what do they need to get there? And that's what their goals are. And that's what our support services should really focus on. We look at also their current skills and the skills they don't have. What do they need to be more self-reliant, more independent, or more happy? What resources do they have? One of the things that we are now seeing with this lockdown is that, we don't tap into people's normal, natural resources. They're, bringing their families into our services is so important. And at this point, it would have been a great thing to have built a little stronger so that we could easily kind of go between, the supports that they have now and the supports that we provide, instead of having kind of isolated, siloed services. So let's really look at how do we tap into and incorporate the person's own personal resources into supporting them, because again, if we're not there, they don't get to do it. And we need to really look at how can we make sure that our services and supports lead to that sense of independence and that ability to access things, even if we're not in the picture. Looking at community services like job coaching. So when a person learns, when we have someone in a job, when they start to learn, our big emphasis is developing natural supports and moving our facilitator out of the picture and our coach out of the picture. And we need to look at that for community support as well, helping the person to really establish a social network and helping them to access the community and then fading out of the picture. And it's not a dump and run. We don't just dump them into the community and say, oh, you're good, off you go. But we really fade slowly so that we can address any sort of issues or concerns or skill deficits that might be there. And also to get the community settled and able to support the individual and comfortable with that is also another big piece of what we're trying to do. So again, it's not necessarily a lifetime need. So, when someone, I think I said before, one of the programs I was working with said, it's like 12th grade forever. We keep them in they come here, they put their stuff in a locker, it's exactly like high school. So we have to get away from that idea that we have to have a special place for people to go, a special, and it's like high school, because adult life isn't like that. It's flexible. You've got choices. You can make up your own mind. You can do what you like. and it's based out of your house. It's not based out of a school. So what we need to do is really start looking at our services in a very, very different way, and really starting with the whole person and moving forward. Again, we're building that village, and really looking at who that person is and how they define themselves. How do they see themselves, and who do they want in their village and around them? And then helping people to looking at, kind of creating a network of support and social opportunities for them. But what we need to do is we need to look at kind of when and where do people socialize in your community, and especially in a resource-rich urban environment, it can be easy to find something to do at all times. But in more rural areas or suburban areas, people tend to leave the area to go to work, to commute to work, and then they come back. So being in a suburban area during the day can be very, very, it can be pretty desolate. And there aren't a lot of opportunities, there aren't a lot of resources. So you may have to be very, very creative. And in a rural area, people tend to work in, you know, in their, in have, and have multiple jobs. And then they also tend to, you know, kind of, you know, stay on their farms or stay on their land. So, you know, what can you do to really make sure that that person has things to do in their home and on their land, like most people? So we'll talk a little bit about rural, urban, and suburban areas, and how to really manage those differences and variances in services. Also, you know, we want to actively facilitate conversations and interactions everywhere we go. So, you know, when we're on the bus, we're talking to the bus drivers, we're talking to all of the doormen at the businesses where we're going in. The volunteer coordinators are pulled into the effort. You know, the desk clerk at the YMCA, you know, everybody is our friend. And we try to make friends everywhere we go, and make sure and introduce people and make sure that they get comfortable and that they are saying hi and greeting people. Again, so that, you know, that they have friends everywhere they go. I think I talked about Anna being the mayor of the Mission. We literally introduced her to every shopkeeper on the way to the BART station, and now she's like the Queen of England. She walks down the hall or down the street, and she's waving to the dollar store, Bill at the dollar store. She's waving to Dan over there at the taqueria. You know, she's got friends up and down the street, and they're all saying, "Hey, Anna, how are you?" And it feels like her neighborhood. And they all care about her. And so that's what we're really looking at, is how can we build that village and that village of support. So, because our goal, again, is to kind of fade our group services and get to a point where it's me and my friends, and we're doing this. And it's not me and WorkLink doing this. It's me and my friends. So natural supports, natural times. When we first start with people, if they need a lot of instruction, we typically do Monday through Friday, 9 to 3, have group services so that we can get at some of the stuff that we need to teach. But as they grow and as they gain independence, we start to fade that, and we start to make it, we start to do things on weekends and evenings, so that they get used to doing things during a more normalized time. And we try to get them to kind of make plans, teach them to make plans with their friends and initiate things by planting little seeds of like, well, wouldn't it be fun to go do this on Saturday? And then what we find is that people are like, yeah. And once they know they can do that, because we're not picking them up in a van anymore and taking them someplace that they think they have to be picked up and taken someplace, but they see themselves as able to do it, and that they can take a bus from their house to a place, or they can ask somebody in their family to drive them someplace, or they have a meeting spot that they can walk to and they can meet their friends. Those are all things that we want to create, and we want to make sure that is built into this village. And again, the last thing is we may have to create opportunities when none exist. So if you live in a rural area or you live in a suburban area where there isn't anything to do when people are at work, you know, what can you build? We'll talk about that and how some of the areas in rural Wisconsin and in Utah and in other places came up with some very creative ways to deal with that. So building meaningful community connections, we kind of map our community and identify, you know, where are the transit routes, where can people get to easily, you know, where are the centers of services for the local community, you know, where are people during the day in these areas, or on evenings, or, you know, when do people socialize, and where is that, and how do people get there, are things that you want to identify in your community. The other thing that we assess is each individual's hobbies and interests, and their community skills, using those profiles in that skills assessment. And the other thing that I was talking about earlier too was also plotting. if you have multiple people in your program, if you're a large program, you may want to look at plotting where people live, because then you can cluster your services around the areas that they're most necessary. Um, in a program like WorkLink, we're a very small program, and we're also in an urban area, so it makes it easy. We can easily access the entire town for everybody. Anybody who lives in San Francisco, it's a very manageable city, so it's not something that we've had to work a lot at. But in certain areas, it can be very, very difficult for people to get around and go places. So you want to make sure that you're clustering services and supports in the area where they're going to be needed and where that person can get to. So really making sure you know what transportation's available, and or how to tap into the person's personal transportation resources is also pretty critical. So we'll be talking about transportation at the end of today, and some creative ideas on how to get around the big T, as we like to call it, because it can be very, very challenging in some communities. So, the other thing that we do is when we're starting to group people, we don't group individuals. We don't give a community instructor 4 people and say, there's your group, you figure it out, what are you going to do with them? We group people according to a commonality or a similar interest or a goal or a skill that they have to learn. So again, it has to be meaningful. Each person in the group, we say, why are they in this group? Why is this meaningful for them? It's not that they just are put in that group just to pad out the group or to give us 4 people to take. It has to be meaningful. So they're there because they're interested in being there. There's a purpose or a goal in mind when they're there. So again, grouping people according to the activity and where they're going versus grouping them based on a community instructor or giving an instructor a group of people that they're with all day. We tend to have a morning and an afternoon activity. So there's a point of transfer usually in the day where the groups are kind of scrambled and people go off with other community instructors, or the community instructors meet them at a meeting spot and go a different direction. So it's a way to kind of, mix things up and give people an opportunity to be with multiple people and multiple instructors throughout the course of the day. And again, consistent weekly schedules. If you have a lot, if you have a lot of plates spinning and you have a lot of groups going, it can be like a circus. So, having it be consistent, having the schedule stay the same. People tend to love structure. A lot of people really want to know, what am I doing tomorrow? And if you bring them in and say, well, you'll know tomorrow and we'll put it up on the board tomorrow, it can be very anxiety provoking for some individuals. So having that consistent schedule that's given to them on Friday morning, they're done, so that they can ask questions and we can go over them and we can explain, what's happening next week. Again, these schedules don't change drastically because the person is going someplace for a goal purpose. They are learning a skill there, so we want them to go more than once. So it's not a bunch of field trips, and it's not a bunch of random events. They're very, very tailored and consistent. So consistent schedules. Again, with rural, suburban, and urban communities, the lifestyle and the sense of community is very, very different. In an urban center, you don't have families per se. A lot of people move into an urban area, and it can be a little transient. A lot of people come in, come out. It's a lot of you find your tribe, as they say. So you have to find your tribe. Versus in a smaller community where you were born into that community and your family lives there, your tribe is established already. So the lifestyle and the sense of community is very, very different. In a suburban area and in a rural area, it focuses on family. It focuses on individuality and people doing things kind of independently. A lot of people have jobs where they work in a rural area where they work very independently, and the way that they socialize is to get together at the end of the day, or to play on a baseball team or a softball team on Thursday nights. So it's the sense of community is very different, and where people socialize and how people get together is also very different. So again, it's kind of a family versus a tribe element. Both have their benefits, especially if you have a family you don't like. You get to pick your tribe versus your family. But it also families are a wonderful support for the individual, and they've kind of the person has grown up being supported by their family, so it's natural for a family to say, well, but what I've seen is in rural areas, the provider comes in and starts doing things, and the family starts saying, well, I guess that's okay. And it's this weird dynamic that comes up, and the families are kind of like, well, I kind of thought I'd be involved in this. And there's this whole kind of lift them out mentality of our support services and special ed and our disability services that make it kind of unusual for families, and it drives kind of this, it creates kind of this buffer between the individual and the community versus really kind of integrating the families and bringing the families into this and helping the families to support this individual should be the role we see ourselves in. The other thing that we look at in rural and suburban areas are what are the big events? What are the things that happen in the community that bring that community together? And where can people bond with others in a community? And it can be very, very different. Obviously in an urban area, there's lots of nonprofits, there's lots of activity, there's lots of events, there's all sorts of things that you can get involved in. In suburban and rural communities, it can be a little more challenging, but they're out there. There's the county fair. There's the volunteer fire department's crab feed. Whatever it is, get involved with those things in your community, and not just attending them, but actually organizing them. And that is a great way to kind of build connections and build friends. So who are the movers and shakers is kind of what we look for in a rural, even in a suburban, and even in an urban area. Who are the people that are really kind of driving this, that really know the connectors? Those are the people you really want to incorporate into your services and your supports, and really connect the individuals we support to those people, because they will take them far. So public resources, again, may be very, very limited. So you may have to create opportunities or ways for people to connect. In San Francisco, we like to say there's a nonprofit for practically anything you can dream up. I always say there's probably a squirrel rescue outside out there, who knows, there's just anything you can possibly dream of. There's a nonprofit to support it. So, we don't struggle with trying to find places to find people's with similar interests, but you may have to kind of create opportunities or find ways for people to connect. And there have been some very, very creative things done across the country. In Rhinelander, Wisconsin, which is a resort town in the north of the state, they were working with a young woman who they were trying to get her to do something and to give back. They were like, she was kind of not participating, didn't really want to go out in the community. And they said, you have to help your community. And she had no real interest in anything and didn't want to do anything, didn't want to go to the food bank, didn't want to do, whatever the normal things that they did in the community. She had no interest. Habitat for Humanity didn't care, so she was, didn't want to do anything. And they said, well, you have to give back. You have to find a meaningful thing to do. And so they were really kind of like, what is it? What about you? What's unique about you? And she said, I don't know. I like the color purple. And she did. Everything she owned was purple. She dressed in purple. She had a purple backpack. She had, you know, and everything was purple. Anything she had was purple. And so they said, well, what can we do with that? What do we do with purple? And so she said, I don't know, maybe I make purple things and sell them. And the Headwaters was the name of the organization. They were like, oh my God, that's beautiful. So they started a purple sale every month. They helped her to organize a purple sale, and she then gave the money to. They said, well, okay, so you know, this isn't to benefit you. This is to benefit the community. So where do you want this money to go to that you raise? And she said the women's center, the shelter, the women's shelter. So they started setting up a table at Walmart. Walmart lets nonprofits or you know, people, you can set up a table if it's not to, you know, sell your own, not to do a garage sale or anything, but to benefit a nonprofit. So they said, you know, this is what she wants to do. So she's going to have a purple sale once a month. And Walmart was like, fine, great. So they built, you know, they got a table. They had a banner. They had, you know, and she was charged with coming up with purple things. So she would knit. She was a knitter, so she would knit scarves. She would do purple cupcakes. She would do, you know, anything purple. She would find things that were purple. And so everything at the sale was purple, and she would sell it, and she would dress in purple, and so it was the purple sale. And she, after doing this a couple times, there was another woman who had saw this a couple times and said, can I start donating some purple things? She said, I like the color purple too. So some community person who she didn't know suddenly became her partner in this purple sale. And they started, these two ladies started doing this purple sale once a month and donating the money. And this woman got, they took a picture of her, put it on the Rhinelander Post. She's you know, she was donating the money, and now everybody knows her. Everybody in the city, oh, it's the purple lady. So she's gotten to be a you know, and she's not seen as someone with a disability. She's seen as the purple lady of Rhinelander now. So very, very, you know, creative and very unique. The other thing in Utah, there was a diaper drive. LDS, the church, had a community gathering where they would gather stuff for babies. So, you know, bassinets and equipment, baby equipment that your child had outgrown. And then also diapers and other things that, you know, you wanted to donate. And they had collection centers all around the town. And it was a small town in the you know, the south of Utah. And they did this often, and it was these 6 women who kind of organized it every time. And the provider said, you know, we don't want her just being a collection center. We want her actually helping to coordinate and manage it too. So they got her on the committee with support, and then they also made her garage a collection center for her neighborhood. So she had to chronicle what was brought in and then put it on the computer and upload it so that they knew where it was and what was there. They had a giveaway site that they consolidated everything. So they helped this woman to participate in this diaper drive in a very active way. And she is now best friends with the 6 women who run this, and they're doing other things, and they call her and say, would you like to help with this? Would you like to help with this? So again, not just participating by dropping off diapers, but actually running the diaper drive. The Kiwanis Club in Napa, California, there's a program that they didn't have a lot in Napa to do during the day because it's kind of suburban, and, you know, kind of, you know, it's all focused on growing wine and kind of farming. So one of the things that they noticed was that the place that people kind of connected was what they had a very active Kiwanis Club. So they now get people involved. And that, of course, is a service club. So you go out and build playgrounds and you go do certain things. So they have all of, you know, individuals in their program. They have 3 or 4 now who are active members of this Kiwanis Club. individually, not as a group, but individually, and they pair them with the other members, and it's turned out to be such a great opportunity, and they're included and completely loved by their fellow Kiwanis. Community gardens and potluck dinners. I think I talked about Starfire, the Cincinnati, Ohio program that does that pop-up puppy parks. So they do community organizing projects around, you know, what is this community lacking, and how can we put that together, or how do we draw this community together? And they make the person with the disability in charge of it, and it builds social capital. It builds it defines that person, and it really helps them to connect to their community in meaningful, constructive ways, and really, you know, gives them kind of a place. The last one is an organization in Tennessee, in Knoxville, that was referred to as, you know, the guy was like, well, we don't really have anything. It's, you know, it's a very rural area. And I said, well, there's got to be something you can do to help. And he said, well, yeah. He said, you know, I'm thinking about my church. There's this older woman who wants to, who's getting very old, and he said, you know, her house is looking shabby, her yard looks shabby, you know, maybe we can do something like go grocery shopping for her, or you know, do her, you know, go over and rake leaves or shovel her driveway, or, you know, like whatever. So they contacted her, and she jumped at the chance. So they would take a group over once a week, and they would help her with some sort of project, and she would dictate what that project was. And they gave her kind of a list of things that they, you know, would just to kind of chum the water. These are the kinds of things that we could do. So she so she starts having them in for lunch. She's like, you can't leave yet. I made lunch, you know, and so they'd have to go have lunch with her, and she'd bake them cookies, and she'd buy them gifts. And she was just, you know, she loved this group. And she then started going to her church, and she started saying, you know, well, you should have some of these helping hands people at your house. So all of a sudden the provider started getting calls from the, you know, this woman's friends saying, you know, I would love to have one of your helping hands groups. And so they started doing it as a helping hands group. And they put these little groups together for seniors around the area. And it was such a hit. So you can see, building the community, if you're creative, you can build community. And we need to start really looking at, you know, how to create community where we live. The other thing that I wanted to kind of stress is that, you know, these community living supports, it's not about being in the community. It's not about taking people out and being in the community. And at one point I said to my community, one of my program managers, I said, you know, she had worked at a number of programs, and she was working for us, and she had just started. And I said, well, she said, you know, this just feels so different. And I said, well, why do we feel different here? And she said, you know, we're not messing around. She said, we're not just out there messing around. She said, we're really out there to learn and to help people become independent. And she said, it just really feels different. So it's about teaching skills. It's not about going on outings. It's not about field trips. It's about really looking at who the person is and going someplace multiple times so that they develop friendships and that they develop confidence in that place. It's also about systematic instruction and really looking at taking data on what people, so outcome-oriented, purposeful activities, and then really looking at, are we making progress? Is this person successful? And it can be hard when you're out in the community to define successful, because it's person-centered and it's based on what's meaningful for the person. So you're not going to be able to have these kind of lock, stock, this is when you're successful for everyone. So really looking at measurable outcomes and actionable steps is what you start with. So, you know, kind of that 5,000-foot level, you know, this is what this person wants to learn or needs to learn. And then kind of looking at, how would we teach this, and what would this look like? And then what would we consider a success. You know, what is a criteria for success? For some people, it would be independently be able to do this. For other people, it might be, you know, with more self-reliance, or, you know, 50% of the time they do it. You know, it may not be 100% of the time and they do it independently. So really looking at what would be the criteria of success, and putting numbers on it so that you can measure it. And really focusing on the skills that the person's learning, not the services that we're providing or what the person has to stop doing. I've read a number of ISPs where, you know, it says the person will go into the community 3 times a week. That's the services. That's what we're providing. We're taking them out into the community. It's not what the person is learning. So really focusing on what is the skills, what are the things that you're trying to teach. And it's not, you know, so-and-so will stop pestering people. You know, what do you want him, what do you want the person to do? How, you know, what should they be doing, not what they should not be doing, so that you can actually measure. We use task analysis. We use tally sheets. We use all sorts of methods of kind of collecting information. And we use task analysis, especially if it's a critical skill. And that's something that we need to document and really need to know where the person's level of independence is. So, so street crossing is a good example. We want to know 100% for 6 months that this person was crossing streets in a variety of streets. So streets with a street light, streets with a stop sign, you know, that we've tested this person again and again, and they've proven that they can do this. So a task analysis is used for really critical things like that. It also helps us to create kind of a standard language and a standard approach, especially for someone with more significant disabilities. And we use systematic instruction. So fading our prompting and really looking at how much support this person needs to accomplish that task. So a task analysis, and we don't have time to go into kind of systematic instruction today or what that looks like, but this is a very, very good tool, and something that really, what we found, demonstrates, you know, progress and helps us to understand, you know, where that person's at. And I'll show you an example in a minute. So why do we collect this data? Again, the biggest thing is to provide feedback to the person that's learning. So we tell them, you know, here's where you're at, this is what you're doing, and oh, you know, you did it 4 out of 5 times, perfect, you know, that's good enough, let's go, you know, let's think of something new to learn. Or if it's 100%, you know, we can say, you know, to parents, like street crossing, we can say, you know, it's not just, oh, they know how to cross the street, and I say so, but we can show them this task analysis that says, you know, for the last 6 months, your son or daughter has aced it, and it's numbers. So it's, you know, it's quantitative versus qualitative, and for people, you know, and me as a parent, I would want to see some quantitative data on street crossing before I said, okay, yeah, go. So again, log notes. I don't know how many of you have daily documentation that focuses on log notes, but I have to say hard numbers are a lot better. I despise log notes because you cannot tell without reading 6 months worth what, you know, what's going on or what's happening. So it's impossible to really gauge progress, and it's really impossible to kind of tell what's going on. And oftentimes the log notes consist of something like, you know, Johnny had a great day today. And that's vague. It's not targeted on the goal. So if we can lock it in and use data collection sheets that really focus in on what that person is learning and what the criteria for success is, again, that which gets measured gets done. So this is a task analysis for street crossing. And as you can see down at the bottom, it shows the level of independence, 10%, 18%, 30%, 45%. So we can see the individual is learning. We can also see what's causing him a great deal of difficulty, or where he's not learning, or she, you know, and what he or she is able to do independently. You can see where there's those gains are. And again, you can see exactly what level of support the individual needs. So this is a task analysis and kind of breaks down how to cross a street. And then we're able to see, you know, what's giving that person trouble and if they're learning, which is the whole purpose of why we're out there. We're not messing around. So collecting data, we collect data on everything we do out there. So not everything, but what's relevant. So why are we here? So there's you can see here, there's a cooking group data sheet that kind of captures, you know, what someone's doing at a cooking group. It's not just we're making scrambled eggs and we're going to make scrambled eggs and it's, can you use a can opener? Can you use a, you know, can you use a stove, pot holders, and remove a dish from an oven? Do you know how to set the oven? All of those things are there so that we can see, you know, what the person knows and what they don't know. We probe sometimes, you know, we collect data. We don't often do it every single time. We collect it once a month in some instances. We collect it, you know, once a day in other instances, or every 10 minutes, depending on what the need is and the criticalness of the skill. But we're careful not to aggregate the data too much, or you'll lose the details. So if you just say, you know, the you know, with this task analysis, if you just said he's at 10%, if you just use that bottom independence level, you would lose all of that detail of where the person's falling down or what they're not learning or what they are learning. Whereas if you say, you know, now they're at 45%, it still doesn't show you, you know, what they're still working on. So again, if you aggregate the data and if you just focus on the level of independence, so to speak, you're going to lose that level of detail that really tells you, you know, what's going on. And it also, you know, can sometimes point out patterns. So the person on Tuesdays does a really poor job, or on Mondays, a really poor job, and by Friday, they're doing really well again. And then, you know, of course, they have 2 days over the weekend and they come back. So what you can see is they need a little refresher on Monday mornings because they're forgetting what their job is or what they're doing. The other thing that we're trying to do is we're trying to keep it simple. We're trying to spend our time teaching, not counting. You know, you don't want the community instructor sitting there taking data, and not actually providing instruction. We also try to make it visual so that we can share it with the person, especially if people don't read. We try to use pictures. We try to use graphs whenever possible. And then again, if it's a critical skill, we always collect data. So street crossing versus they may have a goal also of a social goal of greeting somebody. You know, obviously if, you know, the critical nature of that is quite clear. So, you know, people can die if they don't cross the street correctly. If you don't greet the person when you walk in, you know, nobody's going to die. But greeting people is important, and being socially you know, adept can be a very, very critical skill. So again, critical skills always take data. In some instances, the data will look very different. You know, with greeting coworkers, what we would do is probably use a tally or a probe on a number of different sites to see if the person's doing it across multiple sites. With street crossing, it may be every single time that person crosses a street. The other thing that we look at when we're collecting data is who collects it. So many of the people in our program carry binders with their data sheets in it, and they collect their own data, which is really great because it's automatic feedback. And when they have to put down that they did not do it, or a minus, or something of that nature, it can be very, very effective. So, you know, having them collect the data is a really great way to provide feedback. And these are some of, you know, making it visual, helping the person kind of monitor. So at our City College course for learning to use the computer, we were looking at, you know, typing speed for this one individual, and he would graph his typing speed at the end of the day. He would take a typing test and graph his speed. The other thing you see there is a picture of a ship from store at the Gap. There was a gentleman who was packing shipments for the Gap, and you can see immediately, you know, they wanted what the expectation was that where that red line is, And that is speed per item. And they wanted it to get down to less than 2 minutes in order. So we were able to kind of, say to him, that's what this line is. And you can see where he started. And just by showing him where he was at, he got faster, and we started timing him with using an iPhone, and it really did make a significant improvement. Again, self-monitoring. People collect their own data on their own performance. This is Anna. One of the things about Anna was she wouldn't acknowledge her coworkers. The only people she would really listen to was her job coach. So her manager was like, I tell her something and she just shrugs her shoulders and walks away from me, and or doesn't stop. So one of the things that we said was, okay, so her social interactions are a little in need of work. So we said to her, you need to, when someone talks to you, she would just ignore them and I guess hope they'd go away. So we said, you need to stop, you need to listen, and then you need to respond. And so we said to her, we're gonna look at this. So we started with this data sheet you can see up at the top. And every time someone would come up and say something to her, either hi or, Anna, I need you to do this, did she stop? Did she listen? And did she respond? And so we would put a big plus mark when she did it, and we put a big minus when she didn't. And we would show her right after, like, oh, look, all minuses. You didn't stop, you didn't listen, you didn't respond. And it didn't take very long and before she kind of understood this, and she started stopping, she started listening, and she started responding to people. And her coworkers like, oh my God, she's so friendly these days. And it was immediate. And we started giving her this, and we started having her put the marks on the page. Like, did you stop when your buddy John came over and said he needed you to do this? Did you stop? Yes or no? And she would say yes or no, and we'd have her put a plus or a minus, and then did you listen? Yes or no? Put a plus or minus, and then did you respond to John? Plus or minus. So this automatic feedback, people collecting their own performance. The other thing is a checklist that she carries around on a clipboard with an erasable marker. She goes to the floor, she collects the hangers, she then puts an empty rack there in 4 different locations. And she was coming down and saying she did them all. And of course we'd be like, well, there's 3 of them that are not done. So we gave this to her, and it really helped her accuracy. She would go collect the hangers, but she wouldn't leave an empty rack because she didn't have one, or she had to go downstairs and bring one up. It was very confusing for her. So this made it very clear as to what John needed, her boss, and where and when, and she did this on her own. And she was, we just made sure that the clipboard had the gap on the back of it, and that she walked around with this clipboard. She thought she was one of the managers, I believe. Again, this is our cooking group data sheet. So, sets a table, washes dishes. Again, very broad goals. And if someone was having trouble, then we'd take it and break it down and use a task analysis. So washing dishes, what does that look like if someone was having trouble, and where was the trouble? So again, this is kind of a broad cooking group sheet. And what we're looking at is, once a person knows how to do something, then we move them on. So, once they know how to use a can opener, once they know how to use a knife to cut safely, once they know how to use a stove safely, we move them on, and they don't work on that skill anymore. So again, this is another way to collect data and see, what people can do. This is working out at a gym. We had a young man who was pre-diabetic, and his doctor said, we need you to get down to 186 was what they said. So we were working with him. He was at 208 pounds, and we needed him to kind of start watching his weight and start exercising. So we created a workout card, and it included, 30 minutes on either a treadmill, a bicycle, or an elliptical. And we taught him to use all 3, and he could pick. And then he would do leg lifts, squats, pecs, and he would work his way around a certain number of machines too. And he would do four repetitions of, I think it was five on each machine. And we taught him to use this, and he would then turn this in to us so that we could see what he was doing. And then once a month we would weigh him, because again, the critical piece of this was that he was, you know, getting stronger and losing weight. And we also worked with him on nutrition in a cooking group, so that he understood what sugar was and where sugar is located and what has sugar and what doesn't, so that we could hit it on two different fronts, because his diabetes was getting a little out of control. So again, encouraging independence and engagement. This is one of the things that we're really trying to do. So again, I talked about the binders. These people carry, they know what their goals are. They have their work tools. They have their schedule, their weekly schedule in there. They have their self-monitoring checklists in there, or their data sheets. Anything that they need for the course of their week kind of goes into these binders. And we try to make them their own. We let them, you know, kind of decorate them or do whatever they want, so that you know, that it is something that they're connected with and that they see as theirs. And this, of course, having them be reliant. So they come in and they say, I don't know where I'm supposed to be. We like, get out your binder, let's look. And they then pull up their schedule and we go through it together. Okay, what does it say? And some of the schedules we have written and kind of bold the names if people have sight words. Otherwise, in some instances, we'll use small pictures. We work to actively fade services. So as people gain skills, again, it's not a dump and run. We don't just, oh, you've got this and leave. We start to work on problem solving and how do you invite a friend? And who here can you go to for support or help? And really fostering those natural supports and helping people to do it, you know, independently with peer mentors or their friends, and really helping them to initiate, which is one of the things that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities have never really been taught, is how to initiate doing things with their friends, calling up someone and saying, let's go do this on the weekend or during non-program hours. Down in that lower picture is one of the guys who runs our SF Hike Club, and once a month he plans a hike and a meeting spot for people to go to, and they do an urban hike in San Francisco, and that was one up on, I think they were on top of Corona Heights, but they do they meet at a Starbucks on a Saturday at a specific time. He collects names as to who's gonna, and he sells it. He goes out and says, you gotta come, you gotta come. So it's something that, you know, Jackie owns, and it's his, and they're out and they're doing things. And one of the last things they did is they walked across the Golden Gate Bridge. So they planned how to do that, where to meet, and a couple people didn't know how to get there. So that's where WorkLink stepped in. There was a couple people that was not something that, not a place that they had gone. So one of our community instructors helped facilitate a couple individuals to get to the meeting spot. So that they could go together and then, you know, help them to find their way home on one of the trips that they didn't know how to do. But otherwise, it's peer-led. It's peer-to-peer, and they have, you know, a great time. Two guys at the top are at Hardly Strictly Bluegrass by themselves. They figured out where to meet and hooked up and spent the day seeing bands. So again, you see this confidence, and that's one of the other things the program manager said. She's like, it's like these people own San Francisco, and that to me was very encouraging, because that's what we want. We want them to see this town as theirs and to be part of that community. Fading slowly, again, we don't want to overwhelm the community sites by doing that dump and run. You know, I see people, well, they know how to go to the library, so I'm just going to leave them at the library. And then they start to kind of pester the librarians, or they start to, you know, do things that they're not supposed to. And so you want to make sure that you spade slowly, that you support the group until it's not needed, and that they know how they are to behave there, and that you're also friends with that librarian, and you do that check-in. You continue to check in. How are things going? You know, is there anything I need to do to support this, and help to kind of make sure that they are, you know, doing well, and that they're continuing to participate in an active way. So again, collecting levels of independence, data on levels of independence. The other thing that we teach is problem solving. I think I talked about, let's get lost, and how to find help using their cell phone. How do I call or FaceTime WorkLink if I feel unsafe, or if I don't know where I am. We also tap peer mentors to build confidence, because it feels very different if they're with a staff person, or if they're with a friend. And we have some very capable people at this point who are very, very independent in the community. And we use those as our peer ambassadors. And they are people that we rely on to kind of do that last little step of before a person is independent. We'll have them go with a peer ambassador or peer mentor. And that person, will support them when we're pretty clear that they don't need it. But they're just for that mental support. We sometimes will send them with a peer for that one last time. And then as services fade, we have a sign off. We have an affidavit that says this person can travel independently here or there, or to this site or that. And we revise their service plan. But again, we continue to check in to make sure things are going well. One of the ways that we love to, as people get very, very independent in the community, one of the last things we do is we start signing them up for Let's Get Lost. And this is a group that goes out and we get them lost, and we have them find their way. So we have them miss their BART stop, or we have them go all the way to Oakland, and oh my God, we're in Oakland, now what? And they have to problem solve and figure out, who do I call? What do I do? Who can I ask? Who is this safe? We talk all about stranger danger. We talk about, navigating and getting yourself found. Who can we reach out to? How do we identify someone that can help us? And then also they all carry a little card that says, please call WorkLink, I need help. And so having them show that card to somebody that says, will you help me, is really important, so that they're confident doing that. And then we also do disaster training. So what do you do if there's a massive earthquake or a tornado or a huge snowstorm, and you're stuck, or you can't get home the way you used to? What do you do? Who do you call? And we work a lot on using cell phones to do that, and making sure that they're checking in. Oftentimes too, we will also put GPS on cell phones. So, we love technology. We have triptychs for traveling, which is just a bunch of pictures that as people see the McDonald's there, they slide it. And what are they looking for next? And what we see is that people on the bus learning a route pay a lot more attention if they know what they're looking for, instead of waiting for the community instructor to say, okay, we're there, pull the cord. They are the ones that are deciding, oh, there's this, and they slide it. Oh, there's that landmark, and they slide it. And then, they're paying attention. They're not just sleeping and waiting for the community instructor to tell them it's time to get off the bus. So triptychs are great. Alarms, we teach people to Skype. So now we are going virtual. Because we're all locked in our houses, and we are starting, today is our first quarantine cafe, and everybody's getting on Zoom, and we're doing a social hour with them, and kind of a talent contest too. So it's a kind of an open mic situation, and a birthday celebration for a young woman whose birthday is today. And it's a way for people to kind of get together. And this would have been really difficult had we not taught people how to use their cell phones to FaceTime, and how to use how to use Skype. And now they're all on Zoom, and it's going to be, hopefully it'll go flawlessly. Who knows? Again, so cell phones are an amazing tool. iPads, another thing. So we teach them to use these things for chore lists, for checklists, for Dynavoxes, all these things. So technology is an amazing tool. And it really, really helps. The other thing that we also teach is Facebook and WhatsApp. So we build, WhatsApp is a great app that is only people who are invited can get on. So it's very, and it's encrypted. So, we use it for our staff to stay connected. And what we like to say is it's good enough for ISIS, it's good enough for us. So we use it to connect our staff, so that, you know, if someone's out, it goes up on WhatsApp, so-and-so is at, you know, out sick today, so that other people know, oh, he's in my afternoon group. I know that person's not going to be there. So it's a great way to keep the team connected. And it started out just by like keeping the key, you know, kind of doing an attendance kind of thing, you know, who's there, who's not. And what happened was, as people started posting pictures of things that were going on, and when people would get a job, that we'd have a picture of the person, and guess who just got a job, and it just brought the team together, and everybody then can feel like they're part of this and part of that person's success. So it's a really great way to kind of connect and support a field-based team, as well as to help you know, the effectiveness of the service as well. So WhatsApp, I don't even know how we used to work without it. So technology is an amazing thing. So here's our travel affidavit if you wanted to take a look at that. You know, so when appropriate, we fade our services, and we have the person, the care provider, or the parent, and so, you know, sometimes the social worker, depending on it. So some people come into our program and they've been traveling independently all over forever, and they can check this and say, I don't really need support. You might have to show me once, but I don't really need travel support. All the way down to, you know, someone who's gone through all the steps. So before someone is independent in the community, we have to make sure that, you know, we feel they're safe, and everybody's on board with saying that that person is safe. One thing that we also encourage is community employment. So, you know, our whole thing around discovery, we see our services as a way to really encourage the idea of employment, through discovering who I am and what my strengths are, and then what I'm interested in. And then we use a customized employment method to place them based on that discovery. One of the things that we found that's really beneficial is our wall of fame. We have a board in the office, and every time someone gets a new job or somebody does something really spectacular, they get up on the wall of fame. So everybody is really, and people who come in to get their schedules or come in for an ISP meeting, they can see, you know, here's my friend working at, you know, wherever they're working, and they're like, oh, you know, and it's not like that person just disappeared. And so they can see, oh, this is what they're doing now. And we talk about it, and we say, you know, they're on the wall of fame, and it seems like a real accomplishment. So it's pretty funny. We had one guy go to work, and he came in the next day with his picture that he took himself. He went down on a Saturday. He knew he got the job. So he went down on a Saturday and took his picture at work and brought it in. And he also had gone onto the computer, and he knew that we had kind of done these, you know, the logos of the companies. And so he printed out his own logo, and he came in on Monday morning, first thing, and said, this needs to go up there. So, so we put it up. So, you know, it's a big deal to get on the wall of fame. The other thing that we do is we do lunch and learn. So when someone does get a job, we make them the expert, and they can come talk to people about what their new job is about. And we do a quick little video or PowerPoint that they can explain to their friends what they're doing and where they work, and introduce them to their coworkers, and make it all sound fun and exciting. So community integrated employment can easily be encouraged in these two ways. Okay. The other thing that people can do too is, if you have, I know a lot of people are reticent to leave because they feel that their work training or the workshop is their job. And I think one of the things that we need to do is to make that clear, that that's training and it's not a job. So really making sure that people understand that this is just an opportunity to learn some skills before you get a job. And to treat it as such. So, you know, start, you know, as they're learning, you know, as they're gaining skills, start fading the hours. Okay, you don't need to be here anymore. Let's start looking for your real job, and start using that language with them so that they don't see pre-vocational workshop settings as their job, but as a way to gain skills. So, and many places are now looking at, you know, time limiting these, or saying, you know, you need to you can only be in work training for 6 weeks, and then we're moving on, so that people don't get comfortable and reticent to leave. Okay, and again, we do that through volunteering. So it's again, we put people in a variety of sites all over the city, doing all sorts of things. So looking for various sites, doing various things. And again, it's not about just bagging rice. What we're there to do is to teach social skills, independence, professionalism, and confidence, and responsibility. I got to get the job done. All of those things are things that we work on. We treat it like a job. They have a time card where they're learning to punch in, punch out at work. They don't do a time card for going to the gym, or they don't do a time card for going to City College, only the volunteer sites. And this helps, of course, teach them time management skills and how to tell time and a functional sense of time. And also helps them to, we work with them on kind of reporting to a supervisor. We're done with this, what's next? We ran out of this, where can we get more? So those are things that they have to, go and initiate finding their supervisor, and not just waiting for the supervisor to come up and say, oh, are you done? Or, oh, it looks like you ran out of something, so that they're starting to initiate that stuff. I'm done, what's next? This is our volunteer program. This is how we recruit new sites, our WorkLink volunteer program. And it's about training opportunities for the people that we work with. And it kind of explains it for the volunteer sites, and our community instructors carry these with them. And whenever they see a great location or an idea that sparks, or that's we have a whiteboard in the office that says what people are interested in doing, and if someone kind of finds that, stumbles across that, then they can leave this and they can start the conversation using this leave behind this flyer. That explains what we're trying to do with our volunteer program. One of the other things that we do is we have a consumer advisory council, which is a great thing. So these are 4 positions elected from by their peers, and they're selected to sit on the committee for a 2-year stint. And it's all about peer leadership and peer input, and self-advocacy. So they are kind of helping us as the managers and the administrators to evaluate staff. They also help us to do safety awareness trainings and office inspections. So they participate with our safety committee, and they do the inspections. And then they also do a peer training on what to do in a fire, and an active shooter. We also did, a one on COVID-19, and they participated in kind of doing that as well. The other thing that they are is that these are our program ambassadors and our peer advocates. So they are there to kind of, if there's any dissension in the ranks, to bring it forward, but also to provide that support to their peers to do things independently. We give tours of the WorkLink program, so they participate in those and in helping providers or state agencies who come in to see our program. They talk to them and are part of the presentation and the tour guides as well. And then the other thing that they do is they plan annual trips and meetup events. So they help to kind of look at, where do people want to go? This year we were looking at going to Disneyland in Southern California, or Six Flags in Vallejo. Who knows if that's going to happen? Now we're kind of calling on them to do kind of the phone tree and get the word out about our quarantine cafe, and helping them to kind of work with their peers to get on Facebook and to kind of connect people virtually. So we're kind of tapping the community at the Consumer Advisory Council, the CAC, to kind of help us marshal this in this time of need. So again, person-centered, community-based services. It's like managing a 3-ring circus. So it's not all, there's challenges. It's not all sunshine and roses. It's a complete you have no control. You're in the community. You're doing all these things. There's a lot of logistical nightmares. Communicating and managing community-based teams can be very, very challenging. It can be complicated, and tracking what we're doing for who and what hour of service is this, and where does this go, and daily documentation and being accountable and all that stuff can be very, very complicated. But I can tell you it is worth the effort, and it really does come back. We see it again and again. This is a staff schedule, and I'm happy to share these tools in a bigger version so you can actually see, but you can see Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and the staff is across the top and who's doing what. Danita is the program manager. She does some spot things. So some one-on-one kind of, somebody needs to be travel trained to a meeting spot. Somebody needs to be travel trained to, a certain place. A new site or something, she'll step in and kind of help to get the group organized and together. She also is responsible for the schedule. She sets the individual schedules based on what the ISPs and the community instructors are saying the person needs to do. She helps to also develop the community sites, as well as the community instructors participate in that as well. You can see the blue line. That's somebody that has to be picked up and dropped off on a daily basis. He doesn't travel independently. So our community instructor on Monday, Paul, will pick him up at his house and then take him to meet Jefferson at the Ferry Building. They'll have lunch somewhere around there, and he'll drop the gentleman with Jefferson, and then Jefferson will take the person to the afternoon site, and then at the end of the day, we'll take him home. So he's not with the same person every day, all day. There just has to be a point of coordination and transfer for people who need that. Other people are taught to travel independently or travel to a meeting spot, and the group meets at a meeting spot or at the site. That's my dog. So again, when you're looking at the challenges, the first thing you want to think is, how can we do it? Not can't. How, not can't. And really looking at each individual situation. Excuse me. Sorry about that. It's great working from home. So, really looking at how, not can't, look at each individual situations and their personal resources. The other thing that we look at is establishing hubs and meeting sites throughout your service area, so that if someone can't necessarily get to the place you're going, maybe they can get to a meeting spot that you can then pick them up far easier than going all the way to their home or whatever. We also look at eyes on versus semi-independent individuals, and then people who are very independent, and really balancing the groups. I think I talked a lot about that in the last couple, was the third, a third, and a third. So a third of the people may need significant amounts of supports. A third of the people have more moderate support needs, and then a third of them are people who will be independent. So really balancing your program enrollment, and then really looking at partial day schedules. So with starting people more slowly, so people with more significant disabilities, maybe starting them out in a morning activity, and then they're either picked up or dropped off at their house after that, or switching instructors like we do, so that the person isn't with the same staff person all day. And it also allows you to then break that staff person so that they can have a lunch without having someone that needs eyes on and you're out in the community. So it can be very, very complicated, but it also can be done. So you just have to kind of look at, what are the resources, what are the situations, where can you go, what's available, and how, not can't. The other thing that we have is floaters. So we use our service coordinator and sometimes our job coaches. If we have a job coach that has kind of a more flexible schedule, and I can see this person on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, or Fridays or Saturdays. You know, they might be able to be available. So when a staff goes out sick, or we need an extra pair of hands on a site, we can call in a floater. So so the service coordinator or community instructor can kind of spot and help to support the group for a second, or get the person to the meeting spot, or whatever needs to happen. We also have the floaters meet a group. So, you know, if you have a receptionist, maybe the receptionist can go out into the community and break the staff for lunch, and then come back. So, you know, they could spot a group. One-on-one travel training to meeting sites. So all across the city, we have meeting sites, and that we train people to go to these various sites. And then we say, you're going to meet at Pete's, or you're going to meet at the Starbucks, or you're going to meet at the Westfield Mall. And they know those. And then they also know that they can go from their house to those sites. So on the weekends, if they want to go to the Westfield Mall and see a movie, they know how to do it. And we can encourage that. And help them to meet their friends at the Westfield Mall on Saturday, and either go shopping or go to, you know, go see a movie. We also, you know, spot check our independent sites. So if we have someone who is independently doing something, we have a couple people who have independent volunteer jobs or independent sites that they go to. You know, the YMCA. One guy takes a Bollywood class, and his teacher Dan. We check in with Dan to see how things are going. We also check in to make sure that his dues are paid, because sometimes he doesn't pay his dues. So, you know, we kind of check in with the YMCA to make sure that he's participating and paying his dues. We cross-train our job coaches and our administrative staff to support community sites and participants in a pinch. So if something happens and someone goes out sick, or you know, multiple things happen and we're down, because again, it's very individualized and it's very community based. So we'll get situations where, you know, just where having an extra pair of hands would be helpful. So if we have a job coach that we can pull in, or again, the community service coordinator is a great person. So that person has half administrative, half direct service listed on her position. And then, of course, any unexpected illness or behavioral issues, you'll have to really look at, you know, what's your rescue plan? How are you going to bring in the cavalry? Don't wait for it to happen to figure it out. You have to really plan ahead. And worst case scenario, what will you do? And kind of go through that and make sure that you have a plan worked out. How are you going to extract someone who's misbehaving? How are you going to, you know, deal with if one person in the group gets ill? What is the answer? And making sure you have a rescue plan. And then the other thing that we have is we have a book of Plan Bs. So when a volunteer site calls and says, you know, we had a huge event last night, we forgot to tell you, nobody's in the office today, we're canceling, so that we have something that we can do. And you can do that very effectively. You know, Let's Get Lost is something that we can easily ramp up and do with the group. We also can do financial literacy or money skills in a pinch. You know, there are lots of things that you can do that are meaningful in a pinch. So Plan Bs, what are some meaningful ways to address that? And again, transportation, the big T. I think the big thing to really bear in mind is that independence is the goal. So what we're trying to do is not be the transportation provider, but be the transportation planner, to help the person to really understand what they have at their fingertips, and what they can utilize to get around, so that they are not reliant on a paid provider to provide that support, because if they are, they can only do it when we take them. And that's not what our goal is. Our goal is that they will be independently able to access this. So how do we use public resources and the individual's personal networks, and how do we support and bolster those when necessary? But we are the provider of last resort, because otherwise they're going to be relying on us forever. The other important thing to really try to do is to minimize the need for transportation. So if you have a site-based program, that's a problem because you have to congregate everyone. You have to get everyone there and then get them out of there. And oftentimes those sites are in places that are very inaccessible by public transportation because they were set up to be a work area. So they're in business parks or they're in places that, you know, people drive to. So you're really kind of digging yourself into a big hole if you're bringing people and congregating people at a site versus going from their homes and into the community. So centralized program site and satellite locations. So one of the things I'll show you in a second where WorkLink is, and we're in the middle of things. So what you want to do is determine where is the middle of things in your service catchment area. Where do people want to be or need to go? And that's where your office needs to be. And then what you also need to do is kind of look at clusters of people and where do they live. And that's where your services need to be. So you may have little satellite locations or desks or storefronts in various parts throughout your catchment area. And again, we talked about meeting spots in your service area. So where can people hang out and wait for each other and learn to kind of meet up with their friends or with their groups in your service area? So we use obviously cafes, Starbucks on every corner. You know, like I said, the mall, food courts, things like that. We talked about clustering people geographically, very important. So that, and the other thing that we look for is if you have staff from those communities, especially in rural communities, if you're serving a smattering of small towns, you know, having staff from those communities is so critical because then you're in. They know everyone. They're related to everyone. You know, they're your connection. So hiring staff from these various locations is really critical because then you're not going in as a foreigner. You're not coming in and, you know, trying to figure this town out. You have someone who really knows that town and knows who's who and knows who the leaders are and who you need to connect this person with. Then the other thing that we look at, you know, to kind of look at transportation is are there walkable locations within the person's reach? Because that may be their one option is, or you know, maybe they know how to ride a bike. You know, looking at all of these things. So location. Here's WorkLink, right smack in the middle of San Francisco on Market Street. And this makes it easy. And again, we don't bring people to our office. Our office is an administrative site, so there are no services there. But people do know where to find us, and they will drop in and say, you know, hey, I need this or I need that, or you know, they come in to get their schedules. They come in for their ISPs. So again, a central location so that people know, and it's kind of a touchstone, so they know where to find us if they need us. And then again, we're meeting at meeting spots throughout the service location, and you know, where can people get to? And you can see these are the bus routes. There's 100 of them. So, you know, we don't have a big transportation problem. I'm glad to say. So again, be creative. Think how, not can't. You're looking at every person's individual situation. The one thing that I thought was the most amazing thing I ever heard was I was in a small town in way up by Upper Michigan, in Wisconsin, and I was talking about transportation to this very rural program. And I said, you know, well, what are the challenges? And we were kind of going through them, and they didn't bring up transportation, and they didn't bring up transportation, and they didn't bring up transportation. And I finally said, well, one's missing, you know, what's missing? And they said, well, what's missing? I don't know what's missing. And I'm like, what about transportation? Isn't that a challenge? And they were like, no, it's not. And I was floored. And I said, well, please fill me in. You know, how do you do this? You people are one of the most remote programs I've ever seen. And they said, we're used to this. You know, what they did is they tapped people's individual situations. And the one thing that they said that was really helpful was they started using WhatsApp, and they started creating a I Need a Ride WhatsApp chat group for everybody in the program. And they would put together a group of people on the person's cell phone that would be available to potentially take this person someplace. So they had people from the person's church, they had people, their neighbors, their siblings, their family members, the provider, everybody that they knew that could potentially help take that person someplace was in this WhatsApp. And this person, if this person wanted to go see a movie in Rice Lake, which was 20 miles down the road on a Saturday night, he would say, I want to go see a movie. It starts at 6 o'clock on, Saturday. Can anyone help? And it would go out, blast out to this WhatsApp chat. And people would be like, I'm going to that movie too. I'll take you. Or, I'm going to see my friend over there. I'll drop you, can someone pick them up? And it's a way to see if things are coming together. And then if it doesn't coalesce, the provider sometimes would step up and say, we'll do it. We'll take you. Okay. So I need a ride network. The other thing was ride cooperatives was the other thing that they would do, a carpool. And families would drive once a week instead of the provider doing it. And then the families got to know each other. And the family started saying, well, we should do this on the weekend, or we should do this, what about having them play on the softball team on Thursday nights? Why don't we, and the family started supporting the individual. And it wasn't just one family, it was a couple families together. So it was, again, a way to kind of bond people. Countywide transit, there was a program over by outside of Minneapolis that was really looking at how to utilize all the vans that were available and creating kind of a transit key, a dispatcher for all of the vans available, because there were church vans, there were paratransit, there was a lot of providers that had vans that they would drive and then leave all day, and so they were like, we could have sort of a transportation loop that was a paratransit situation. And they built it, and it was it was a little complicated and a little lumpy getting it going, but there were certain routes that they drove, and certain people drove them, and it was pretty interesting. So how not can't. The other thing that we saw was people posting requests on church bulletins or company break rooms. Will you take me? Or can I pay for gas? I live in Montara. Can you bring me to work? And lo and behold, I live in Montara too. And yes, I'll bring you, and you can give me $5 for gas every week or whatever. People in Ohio were teaching people to ride bikes and drive cars. They had a service for people who were capable of driving cars, and teaching them to pass the test and do the written test. And then also they had an adaptive driving school for some people. So, teaching them to get a driver's license or to ride a bike. One individual that we were talking with paid a neighbor and actually bought him a car and said, your job is to chauffeur our son from here to there on these days, and we'll buy you this car. And the neighbor was like, I'm in, because he didn't have a car. And he was responsible for taking care of the car and fixing the car, doing that kind of thing. But he was also responsible for taking this gentleman 2 or 3 places during the week that he needed to be. So that worked out quite well. And they actually became very, very good friends. And so the guy started picking him up and taking him fishing on Saturdays and stuff like that. So a great way to kind of build community. And then some programs pay their staff to drive their own cars, and you can kind of arrange that so that if you've got people living in the small towns that you're serving, they can pick the people up and bring them instead of sending a van out there. And then at the end of the day, kind of making sure to get them back. So again, making sure that you have small accessible vehicles might be a thing that you would look at, making sure that you can still support people if you need to. If you don't have a robust transportation system like we have, you may have to look at supporting people and having an option like this. This was a Ford vehicle with a fold-out ramp. The doors open and you can pull out a ramp, and a wheelchair can get in and sit in the front seat. And it's next to the driver, so riding shotgun. And the first time they took a man out who had been picked up in a school bus and had kind of been strapped down in the very back of the bus and had been in the back of the bus all of his life. The first time he sat up in the front, he was like, oh my God. And he said, I'm 43 years old. I've never been in the front seat of a car. And he was just absolutely, going out in that van was like the biggest thing for him, because he was part of the conversation. He started directing the guy that was driving, you got to turn here, you got to do, oh, you didn't stop, you didn't stop, you rolled through that stop. So I started like front seat driving. So very, very funny. Again, communication is key. So making sure you're having staff meetings. One of the things that we like to do is cross-train our staff. So we have a bring your coworker to work day. So we take our job coaches, go with a community instructor for a day, or our community instructors go with a job coach when they first start, so that they can kind of see what the other side is like and what's involved. Again, cell phones, critical, and it takes we have a cell phone policy now on how to use cell phones and what we're going to do. Weekly schedules for staff and participants again are printed and distributed and sent home and emailed, and so everybody knows where they're supposed to be and when and with who. Cloud software, very important. So you can do your daily documentation and put up your schedules and everything. And people don't have to come to the office to fill that stuff out, that they can do it at home on a computer or on a laptop. And then again, that's WhatsApp. One of just an amazing tool for many, many different things. So worst case scenario, you're going to have all of those things: emergency cards in their wallets, family disaster plans that are looked at annually at their ISP. What do we do if there is a tornado, and or what do we do? In our case, it's an earthquake, and people cannot get home. So who do you know, who's here, what kind of friends, family are in the area that we might be able to get them there. Predetermined escape routes and quiet spots. If you have someone with behavioral disabilities, you're going to want to scope out those areas. Where might we have this person relax, and find those meltdown, so you're not looking for them during the meltdown. And then of course the cavalry cross-training staff to be able to help when needed. So these are quality indicators again for community-based services, really important. Oh God, it's late. These are things that will tell you if you're doing services right. So person-centered, outcome-oriented, employment-focused, graded and blended, flexible and responsive, building social and professional connections, encouraging independence, and supporting an active and inclusive life. So these should be the crux of everything we do. And you should be able to use these as kind of quality indicators. Our service is doing this. And again, just to close it out, community support services are really about building skills, building villages, and making dreams come true. And realizing again that life doesn't happen Monday through Friday, 9 to 3. And especially in kind of a rural and suburban area, you're going to be hard pressed to find meaningful things to do. So be aware that you may have to look at your services in a very, very different way. And these services and supports might be at night or on weekends. The other thing, services must be person-centered. Again, we're teachers, not caretakers. And that, consistency and structure is key. And it's all about inclusion, not just being in the community, but building community. So I wanted to just open it up and see if anybody has any last minute questions or, any big takeaways or ahas from the past 3 webinars. Things that people are really curious about, is there a way for me to implement this in my organization? Any questions? Pardon my dog. So anybody want to weigh in? Anybody have any thoughts? Anything that sticks out, something that you were really surprised to hear?
I have a question. This is Kristen Columbus.
Hi.
Hello. Um, my question is about, and I don't know what it is like in California and how different our systems are there versus here, but sometimes I think there are challenges with getting, you know, the voc rehab system aligned with the, you know, the CMH system, just in terms of the systems, you know, and services. I know you talked about some of that, like kind of on a philosophical, like a bigger scheme. But when it comes down to like this supports coordinator talking to that voc rehab counselor and making that all work on an agency level, do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, we have two separate teams so that we can keep them, you know, very accountable and very, very clear as to whose responsibility is what. But the two separate teams at WorkLink work very collaboratively. And I think that is the key to making it flexible and responsive. So when someone does go to work, it's very clear and everybody's, you know, on board with what's going on. As far as the Department of Rehab and the social workers at our regional center system, we're that linchpin. You know, we're the one that kind of holds that together. I think so. When because they often, you're right, they work in their silos and they aren't very collaborative. So we're that connector. So what we do is we try to kind of make sure that everyone's informed of what's going on. And as we move someone into Department of Rehab, what we find is we've done the homework. The community side has done the homework. So there's all of that that lovely discovery stuff and all of that stuff. And we have a great idea about who this person is. So we can kind of wrap it up in a nice little box, tie a big bow around it, and present it to the Department of Rehab here and say, you know, and we used to get pushback on people. You know, they would say to us, well, that person is just so significantly disabled, they won't benefit from service. And now when we go and we say, this is what this person wants to do, we don't get that pushback anymore because we've got it all nailed. And they don't second guess us because we're using that kind of customized model. And that's really been beneficial in helping people.
Maybe that's the direction that Michigan needs to go in then.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we have a wonderful rapport with our DVR now because they see that we can effectively take these people and through this intense community supports, you know, really get them independent, really get them kind of out in the community and used to being out in the community and able to ride buses, all that stuff that the Department of Rehab used to have to pay for, you know, after the job. And the poor job coach would have to, you know, not only travel train the person, but get them, you know, deal with hygiene issues, deal with this, social skills, blah, blah, blah. That's all dealt with, you know, or, you know, hopefully well on its way by the time, you know, that we discover who this person is and we can get them started on a job plan. So it's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm a state voc rehab counselor, and your program sounds like it would be wonderful if all of the agencies that I work with were doing this, because that would make my job so much easier. These people would really be
Right.
and ready to go to work. So I'm
Right.
excited about this, and I'm hoping my agencies have been listening.
Yeah. Yeah, because what happens is you know, the person would go to their meeting and oftentimes they'd say, so do you want to go to work? And they say, yeah, I want to go to work. And, you know, I want to make some money. I want to go to work. And then you get them at the Department of Rehab and you have no idea what they can do. You have no idea what their skills are. You have no idea what their interests are. And you're trying to make a plan. And, you know, so they get kind of dumped on your doorstep. Whereas if we start with these community support services and we utilize them in the way that they should be, we can really ferret out who that person is. And then we can move forward and we can use the Department of Rehab monies for what the Department of Rehab monies were intended to do. And that's to, you know, put people in a job. And
And we could do so many more people than what we have right now. So that's exciting.
yeah, 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 really effective. Yeah, and again, they're not getting just dumped on your doorstep, and you are charged with kind of coming up with how to write a plan and put that into play. Okay, were there any things that that you heard that you were like, we need to start doing this, or I'm going to start doing this tomorrow, or is there any additional information or resources that you would be desperately in need of, or feel like you would want more examples of? Because I could certainly get them to Renee and have her send them out to the group as well.
I like the positive profile.
Yeah. It's such a great tool, and it's so accessible. Anybody can do it, and families aren't intimidated by it. Teachers don't say, "I don't have time." You can give it to anyone, and anything they can add, is beneficial. So it's very approachable, and it really is kind of the keys to the kingdom. It really does help us to focus the services on the individual. And that life skills too. I mean, for us, that was just a game changer, because we were able to really identify in a heartbeat where the skill deficits were, or what that person needed to learn in order to be more independent or self-reliant. And it really was kind of a great thing. And it also was a way to really show families that we weren't just focused on the community, but also the home, and how can we make this person a more participatory family member. And that certainly won us lots and lots of friendships and support within the family. And then they saw it as a team effort, and it was a team effort. We're all going to work together to make this better for everyone. And of course, the person really, really benefited from that.
Do you do much with a supports intensity scale? They're doing that a lot. The CMHs in Michigan.
Yeah, no, that's something to look at.
I was going to say, because the life skills one is just a nice, shorter, quicker version, it seems.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the things I kind of pride myself on is all forms need to be 1 page or less. And so we have worked very diligently to keep them accessible. We don't want people writing 18-page reports, because no one will read them, and you can't use them. Whereas this, you can look at in a heartbeat, and in 3 minutes you can have a good kind of, in a nutshell, this is what we should do, versus having to digest an 18-page report and kind of draw conclusions from it.
Sarah, this is Renee. We have a question on where people can find more info on task analysis.
Yes, there's a lot of information on systematic instruction and a lot of information on task analysis. I can certainly share with you some of our other task analyses that we've written. We do training, Transcend does training on systematic instruction. There's also another woman, Terry Johnson up in Washington, who does just a great training on systematic instruction and task analysis and that type of thing. So training is out there. It's obviously it's not something that really is conducive to teaching online, because it's far easier to teach hands-on and in an interactive way. People really get it. So yeah. There is information and there are resources. The online stuff, is a little more difficult to utilize, just because it is, you have to get your hands dirty to learn how to teach.
Great, thank you. Well, let's do this. Let's end the recording, and then we'll see if we have any more questions.